Hi, I'm Danielle Kessner. You're watching Paved with Good Intentions, and I'm watching you. You know, I never wanted to be a princess growing up. There's just too many obligations. Welcome to another episode of Paved with Good Intentions, the show that asks the difficult questions you didn't even think you cared about. I'm Danielle Kessner, your psychic warrior, and this podcast is produced sponsor-free, so thank you for supporting independent artists. Today, we'll be discussing the topic of LARP. If you don't know what that is, I will explain it, so don't worry. But first, here's a piece of random trivia. Did you know that the supermoon blood moon eclipse that happened last night, September 27th, was the first time such a celestial event occurred since 1982, and it will not happen again until 2033. For those of you with cloudless skies, it was indeed a beautiful sight to behold. This is part of what's called a lunar tetrad, which is a series of 4 lunar eclipses that occur about 6 months apart from each other. And the term blood moon, which is a colloquial term, is where it's given the name to a full lunar eclipse because the surface of the moon appears to have a reddish hue. The actual scientific name for that red hue is called the Rayleigh scattering. And best of all, the most important thing about this blood moon is that the apocalypse did not occur. Fancy that. And now on to our episode, Love and LARP. So this past weekend, I went to my friend's wedding, and they got married in a lovely outdoor ceremony in the woods, up in the mountains, and it was just an absolutely beautiful, very, just gorgeous scene. But it was also the most interesting wedding I've ever been to because it happened during a LARP event. If you don't know what LARP is, it stands for Live Action Role Play, and I'm sure most people are familiar with at least Dungeons and Dragons to some extent. It's, a role-playing turn-based game where somebody has a scenario, and then in order to play the game, it requires people to use their imaginations to basically, develop the plot, move forward, advance the story, and all that. That's what role-play is. Live action roleplay takes that concept and actually puts it into a living world context. So instead of just sitting around a table with, a dungeon master card and dice and stuff like that, you actually go out into the world and dress up in character, and when the game begins, you are that character. There is no, cell phones, there's no computers, there's no guns, any of these, fancy, toys that we have nowadays. I don't know why I threw guns in there, because that's... But anyhow, people then, get into their characters, and then they interact with each other through those characters. So that's what LARP is it's that live action role-playing. And my friends who are part of this LARP organization that happens here in Colorado, it's part of a national organization, I believe, and this is the Colorado chapter of it. So they had their, monthly event up in the mountains this weekend, and my friends had their wedding during this event. So not only were they married, and it was an official wedding ceremony, with an officiant and all that stuff. Not only were they married, but their characters in the game were also married. So you had this sort of interesting, interconnection of real life and the fantasy coming together. But since both of them are dedicated to this game that they're playing, it just made it all the more special and more meaningful. And the crowd of people who were there was, family members, close friends, and everybody who was playing the game that weekend. So you had quite a spattering of individuals there, all in costume, but certainly all very happy to see this event unfold. And this is the first time I've ever done it. It's something I've always been curious about because, as a fantasy writer, it's one of those things that it seems like it should be right up my alley. And the fact that I play a video game like Skyrim with such religious devotion seems like, yeah, why not take what I do in Skyrim and take it out into the world and actually, pretend to do that? Well, there's a number of reasons why I haven't done this in the past. Obviously, the first big one is that I am terrible at improvising, which actually doesn't really come across in these podcasts since I don't actually have any real notes. What I'm looking at over here is just kind of little snippets of information. I'm just kind of, going with the flow that I have in my head. So, but I'm not really good at improvising, on the spot, especially with people I don't know. And that's another part of it is I'm thrown into a world with people I don't know. And if I don't know people and I'm not comfortable with them, chances are I'm not going to really tap my creative juices very well. So there's been a lot of things that have kind of intimidated me from ever going and doing this. And so, but I did get to go do it, and I opted to, not everybody who attended the wedding did this, but I opted to play the game the whole weekend to try to understand it, to, experience it, see how it went, and to learn from it. So, and that's what I want to talk about today, is what LARP is. And you're probably already rolling your eyes because a lot of people, and actually one of my friends last night mentioned this, is that it really is a nerdy thing to go out into the woods dressed up in medieval garb with a foam sword and pretend to be this character. That it is an extremely nerdy thing to do. Well, that is an apt thing to point out, but I would also counter with what I witnessed during the event itself. Nerdy, yes, but you know what? I am not ashamed to call myself a nerd. That is one thing I will proudly do. And if you proudly call yourself a nerd, you might as well own it to the nth degree. And I'm not saying that everybody who's playing this game is a bunch of nerds, because that's just a really, lowbrow way of describing what's happening up there. But it takes a certain kind of dedication to do this. So let me just kind of, unfold it a little bit. So when the game begins, everybody gets into character. They, whoever their character is, and their character has a backstory, has, a name, a backstory, skills, certain specific qualities about their character, and, they have a gamer card that tells this is what you can do, this is who you are, this is kind of, your personal character that you're playing in this game. And then they go out into the world, they interact, they, talk with each other, they tell stories, and amidst this sort of social interaction as they kind of, get together and learn and might, fight a couple of creatures along the way. Yes, there are players in the game who play creatures, who will just, randomly attack people, or all that. And so it obviously makes sense for everybody to band together. But, basically then there's also the plot. So along with these little, kind of social interactions and like learning about each other and telling these stories, there's also a larger plot that's going on. And the plot is run by basically non-players. So they don't have characters. They're just, basically almost like the administration. They're the ones kind of the game masters. And the game masters can get into the game as, characters in these, plot points as they pop up. And so with this advancing plot, basically this, there's a larger narrative going on, but then once, the game really starts, people are free to take part in that narrative or go off on their own and do something else. And, when the sun rises, there's all of these little adventure cards which are placed around the camp, basically, and people can go on an adventure, find one of these cards, and when they bring it back, they get to act out whatever this, scene is. So, and it's, requires obviously strategy, it requires ingenuity, creativity, and all that. And this is where I was most impressed by what I saw. Now, granted, because it was my first time, I didn't know half of what was going on. I didn't know most of the rules. In fact, I was afraid to go into combat because I didn't know how many hits I could take or any of that stuff, so it was obviously like I just had no clue what I was doing. And it's really hard to ask people who are so focused on what they're doing for help, because I didn't want to like break whatever concentration they had, because here's like one of the most amazing things that I witnessed from the players in this game is how much focus it requires. In order for you to be this character, because that's what you are in this game, you are not you are this character. And in order to be that, it requires a significant amount of focus. It also requires a significant amount of improvisational skills. So, I don't know how many people who play the game are actors, how many of them are, theater type people, but it seems like a lot of them are, because they certainly have the ability to just on the spot, have, just figure things out, come up with, stories and all that stuff. It's just like this very quick, on your feet thinking to advance the story, advance the plot, figure these, situations out. So that's one of the best things I saw in how dedicated the players are to that character, and how strong they are at keeping that focus. So anybody who says that it's just a bunch of nerds in the woods with foam swords is definitely hasn't done it, because I can say, having almost zero improvisational skills myself, it is hard. It is really hard to be able to go out and actually live that, to do that. It is a challenge. And so my hat's off to everybody who plays this game with such dedication, because they clearly know what they're doing, and they're clearly comfortable in being able to, strip off who they are in real life and put on this character in this game and live that character for a couple days. It's impressive. And so the game itself then also plays kind of like real life, because people are, you have to, in the game, you have to be able to survive and all that. So you need to do things like eat, you need to, rest and all that stuff. So in the game, there's actually real life scenarios like business, economics. There's factions, so different groups that, people can join, and sometimes those groups hate each other, just like in real life. You've got the Republicans, you got the Democrats, you got all those people kind of scattered in there, choosing their sides. Different beliefs, different customs. Certainly, some people are good, some people are not. So it's a very real world kind of thing. And they have their, businesses. So like if you go to the tavern, you want to buy a drink, you can pay them 2 silver, and they actually have coins that you can use as their currency. They also have, gems and spells and stuff like that. Like I said, being a first timer, it was far from simple. It's overwhelming, actually, how much there is going on. And when you have very little guidance and very little understanding of the rules, it is extremely difficult to actually participate, because you don't know what the outcome is going to be. You don't know how you're going to actually do these things. I didn't know 90% of what I was supposed to be doing, or what needed to happen, because I didn't really have any kind of guidance going into it. But I tried to do my best. The other thing that I saw, and this is where I feel like if I ever do this again, it is something that would be something that I could tap, and I would want to tap quite a bit, is how much creativity there is inside and outside of the game. So inside the game, obviously, it's role-playing game. So role-play is all about what's in your imagination. What can you, when given a simple scenario, what can you do with it? What kind of creative, situation, what can you do with this, idea? What can you figure out? What can you learn? What kind of story can you tell? That's what role-playing is all about. So in the game, there's a ton of this. I mean, there's obviously the plot that, goes in its, set direction, but then people, when they, impose their own perspectives on it, their own experiences, you learn a lot more, and it's this wonderfully creative atmosphere that people can bring into this game. And not just in the game, but also out of the game. What I saw from people were incredible artists, people who take real dedication in creating artwork, whether it's, makeup, whether it's costuming, whether it's, actual painted emblems. Just the amount of creativity in these crafts that they're putting together, shows that this is not just something that they do for fun. It's something that is a part of who they are outside of the game too. It is very much something that they are, it's in their heart to do. And I always admire people who dedicate themselves to their passions. I've talked about passions on this podcast before, because it's something I truly believe in. And what I saw this weekend was that passion. I saw people who truly took to heart what they are passionate about and lived it, like literally lived this passion, which is just a fantastic thing to see. So the dedication in this game is remarkable, and my hat's off to everybody who plays it. That's a dedication that you can just point to them and say that's weird, that's nerdy, that's different. You can do that, that's fine, but you can't question that dedication because it requires an amount of focus and creativity and just all around. I don't even know the word to describe it, but the dedication. That's what it is. It requires so much of that you just cannot marginalize it if you haven't experienced it. And I don't feel like I did enough in this game. Like, I don't feel like I participated enough. I don't feel like I did my part to really advance anything or to learn anything really a lot. I kind of spent a lot of time on my own, just kind of off to the side, listening, watching, trying to learn. But again, with these are people who've been doing it for a long time, and so they have it down. They know what they're doing. They know how to play the game. They know how to interact. They know everything. Me, being an awkward social person anyway, just getting into a situation like that is obviously going to be a challenge no matter what. But the real question on my mind, and the question that I was asked by a number of people on my way out, once they found out at the end of the game that this was my first time ever trying LARP, which probably came as no surprise once they figured it out. During the game, they were probably like, man, she is terrible. But the question is, would I do this again? So I have a month to decide if I want to do the next event. Obviously, I can do an event whenever I want, but I have a month basically to decide if I want to do the next event. And, auspicious or not, I have nothing going that weekend. So, there's a possibility it might happen. But the question is, do I want to do it again? And I'm not sure, because obviously, it's a real challenge for me to go out and meet new people, and especially to do so in such a, a facade, and a way that it's just being myself is hard enough. To try to be a character is even more difficult, especially when I go in having really no idea how it's supposed to go. And what I was told is that you learn more, and it is rocky at first, but you learn more, you get used to it, and eventually you do start to master it. So, it's certainly something that I'm considering, but I have to question, is it something that I could do again? Is it something that I would have fun doing? For most of the day, Friday night was fun because I got to kind of learn and observe and do some things. Sunday morning was fun too because once they found out I was a first time ever gamer, they decided to kind of bring me along on an adventure. So that was kind of fun to learn and do that. But most of Saturday was not, aside from the wedding and all that, most of Saturday was kind of iffy. And that's kind of part of my personality is if I don't know something, I just kind of pull myself out. And I don't know if I'd be able to express myself well enough to make a full game of it. So, would I do it again? Maybe. I don't know. All I can say is that I was really impressed by what I saw, by the people I saw, by what they did, the game itself, the creativity, all that was just fantastic. And it seems like it's something that should be right up my alley because I love fantasy, I love roleplay, I love that kind of mentality. But to actually live it is something that I would struggle with. But again, I got to give all the credit in the world to the people who do play that game because they're pros, they're fantastic at it, and they certainly made it an enjoyable experience. So that's LARP. That's LARP for you. LARP. Alright, well, thanks for watching. You can check out more Paved with Good Intentions right here on YouTube or on iTunes and Stitcher. You can also check out my other videos and anything I've ever favorited. I do have feelings, Be sure to check out my podcast translation, which can be found at the link below. as well as on iTunes and Stitcher. Please visit me on Twitter at Danny Kessner, or you can find me on Facebook. If you have any questions you'd like me to ponder on the show, send me an email at translationpodcast@gmail.com. I do want to hear from you, and your little dog too. And once again, this podcast is produced sponsor-free, so thank you for supporting independent artists. We'll see you on the other side.